The book of Exodus in chapter 20, verse 8 says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Well, what does the Sabbath day look like for us today? And today I have one of my favorite guests, Dr. Bill Davis, joining us from Covenant College. And please don't mind some of the sounds you might be hearing in the background. I think Dr. Davis is having renovations at his school, and we have a funeral taking place just above my office here. So please forgive all sound things. But Dr. Davis, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and help us think about Sabbath rest.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be with you, Jonathan. The teaching on the Sabbath, I've been doing some kind of teaching on it for over 30 years in one context or another. And it coincided, the beginning of teaching it coincided with having to make choices as a parent for what we would do with our children. So my wife and I, a long time ago now, we had a toddler. And so what did we want for the toddler? And
I think you probably wanted Sabbath rest.
Well, we wanted Sabbath, true.
From your toddler.
But it was, what we wanted was for him, because our oldest is a boy. So when it was just him, we wanted him to grow up to look forward to Sunday being the best day of the week.
Yeah.
And we weren't sure how you get there, but when he was 2, we started what we thought would be a campaign to convince him to look forward to Sunday and not to see it as a day of dreariness.
Right.
And so even at the age of 2, he had very low-level chores, like put your dirty clothes in the hamper kind of chores.
Right.
But so 6 days he labored, and on the seventh day he had no chores. He could leave his socks on the floor.
Yeah.
And then 6 days he could have Cheerios or Wheaties, but on the Lord's Day, he would be carried from bed to the breakfast table, where there would be some disgusting chocolate frosted sugar bombs cereal.
Disgusting to you.
Right.
Fantastic to him.
Right. Fantastic to him. So even, he can't remember a day when Sunday wasn't structured as a day of delight. So it was a day when someone else did his chores and he had sugary food and no limits on things, and he got to go to church. So every once in a while you have an event where you think, wait a minute, we got something right. And we were putting him to bed. We had a ritual for putting our children to bed. What was the worst thing about today?
Yeah.
What was the best thing about today? Let's pray.
Yeah.
So we'd pray, we'd sing Jesus Loves Me, and we'd turn the light off and hope that was the end of it. Well, you know how parenting goes. But it was Saturday evening. We were putting him down, and he said, "What was the worst thing about today?" And I don't remember what it was. And then I said, "What was the best thing about today?" He said, "Tomorrow's Sunday." And I said, "Uh-huh." And so he said, "Well, tomorrow, when I get up, I'll have sugar cereal." He was 6. "I'll have sugar cereal. We get to go to church." Yes.
Oh, victory.
We get to go to church. When we get home, we'll have a big lunch. And then all afternoon, you won't be busy. You won't be on the pewter. Because the other thing we did with the day was, because we weren't doing other work, we devoted it to spending time with our children. We'd go for a walk. We'd play games together. When the children got older, the rule in our house, and this is controversial, you can argue with me about this. The rule in our house was, during the week, no video games. On
Yeah.
Sunday, you can play all the games you want,
Yeah.
as long as you're doing it together.
Good. Yeah.
So we've done all the 2-player Lego games, and we would spend a lot of time together, but they were playing video games with each other,
Yeah.
but with us, and they were watching us be terrible at the game, and they took delight in that because we wanted the day to be a day where we weren't distracted either.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't having to prepare lectures or grade papers. I could give the time to my family. We would go to church together, and we would spend the day together.
Mm.
And so that started a little over 30 years ago. But that started before I was teaching on the fourth commandment to seminary students. And it struck me that the law of God is not, it can be turned into a lot of rules that you have to keep in order to keep God from being angry. But that's certainly not the way the Sabbath commandment would have been heard by the Israelites. They've been working in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah.
They've had 0 days off in 400 years.
Right.
Everybody there had worked every day of their life until they died. And so then they're delivered from Egypt. They go to the mountain of God, and they hear the voice of the Lord from the mountain say, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. On it you shall do no work. None of them said, okay, what exactly do you mean by work? Does that start at sunrise, or does that start? They weren't asking any of those questions. They're saying, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
I'm only working 6 days out of 7. There's a day that I don't have to work. That would have been mind-boggling. And I think it's all the more important for us now, because while we're not slaves in Egypt, we are certainly in the thrall of a culture that thinks that if you're not currently producing something, you're a drag.
Right.
You're a waste of oxygen if you're not being economically productive right now. You're awake. What are you doing?
Yeah.
We need help to be reminded that 6 days is enough. And so what we wanted our children to understand, and then we had to live it, like you've learned this yourself, that if you want your children to believe something, you're going to have to live it first.
You've got to do it. Yeah.
You've got to do it. And so we were abstaining from all of the labor for which we were paid.
Yeah.
My wife and I both. We're just not going to do that. And so the children saw that. The children picked up way more than we expected. One of the things they got was, if you're going to take all of Sunday as a gift from the Lord, that you don't need to. There isn't anything you need to do that couldn't have been done so 6 days is going to be enough. But it's 6 days of diligent work. It's not 6 kind of days. So you work hard, and if there's something that's due on Monday morning, it's done on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. So
that you're not thinking about it on Sunday because it's due on Monday.
Right.
So, and they had to put that on because we were on Saturday at lunch, we'd say, so is your homework for school on Monday morning done? And they, well, right. So you need to get that done.
So you can enjoy your Sunday.
We're not working on it tomorrow. Having the 1 day of rest in 7, that is a rest from the servile labor. The theoreticians talk about the distinction between there's work that you do that is delightful in itself, and then there's servile toil. Well, I really love what I do as a college professor.
Sure.
But it's what I must do. I have a contract. It's expected of me. I couldn't decide not to do it and keep my job. And even though I don't find it miserable, it still counts as the labor that the Lord has given for me to do 6 days. but then not on the seventh.
Right.
So on the Sabbath, I don't have to do those things, and I guard it jealously, and my children do too. Now, my children are all grown and live elsewhere. That's also parenting success, by the way. Your children have
Have the
finished
freedom
college
to
and
move.
they live somewhere else.
Pay
But
their own insurance.
they do, even now. However, because for them, Sunday was the day that we did things together. We worshiped together. We ate together. We played together on Sundays. Even now, like yesterday, today's a Monday, yesterday, spent 2 hours in the Skype call. It's not Skype anymore. Skype has been retired.
Zoom.
But for the last 8 years, every Sunday afternoon, the children and their parents get together to talk about their lives on Zoom or Skype or Google Meet, whatever it is. So we have an electronic family meeting. Yesterday was 2 hours. That's fairly typical, where we learned about their lives. Even though they live in other parts of the country, they look forward to, this is every Sunday, they look forward to a chance for us to get together.
Yeah.
And I think that the rhythm that was established when they were very small people was Sunday's the day that we worship together, and then we spend time together. I don't think that they would make it a priority, and I don't know that I could make it a priority to have Sunday be a day for this kind of family delight if it hadn't been established early and been guarded.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been teaching about the Sabbath as a source of delight, of family delight, but then also for the church. I will say that one of the features of Sunday that my children remember is that you weren't allowed to criticize the sermon until 3:00 in the afternoon. And when your father's a college professor, criticizing the sermon, that's
natural.
a contact sport. And so, but it's also how you impress your dad, that you noticed the theological mistake that was made, or the ham-fisted exegesis that just happened.
I feel for your pastors.
However, the rule was as much for me as anybody, but the rule was you can't complain about the sermon until 3:00 in the afternoon, because you need time to let the sermon affect you.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be submitting to the word preached, which means instead of picking it apart, you're letting it dwell deeply in you. So I wanted my children to do that, but then I learned, because I was requiring my children to do it, I couldn't do it either. I mean, I couldn't complain about the sermon until later in the day. And so then I had to let what the Word of God was setting out to do in my heart do some of it, because I wasn't talking back to it yet.
Right.
But there were days when at 2:59, all of my children were standing next to me, looking at the clock.
Here it comes.
3:00, about the sermon.
Now that it's 3.
Now that it's 3:00. But it meant that the pastors didn't have to worry about one of my children walking up after the service and asking, like, did you forget this other part of Scripture? So they could only say positive things. You can say positive things about the sermon. So, but it's a ritual.
Yeah.
Rituals are repeated, thick practices that we do together that tell us who we are.
Yeah.
It's what the Sabbath always was. It was supposed to remind Israel who they belonged to. So it was a ritual in that sense, but rituals aren't bad. Think about the rituals involved with a baseball team.
Right.
All of the things they do over and over again that reminds them that they're a team.
Right.
And that and some of them are things that you do even though you're not thinking them. You say encouraging things after they strike out, or your teammate commits an error, and you say, "Well, get the next one." These are rituals,
Yeah.
but they're really important for establishing who we are as a community. And the rituals that go with worship are certainly important, and you can only do those when you're physically in the place with those other people. So you can't build a church with digital bricks. I just learned this from you. You also can't learn the rituals of the life of Christ together if you're not physically next to each other.
Right.
And I think the Sabbath Sabbath observance, the gathering together for worship that, Hebrews 10 encourages about that. It says, look, don't set that aside. It's utterly crucial to the formation of the community, and your soul is significantly shaped by the community around you shaping you. So the words of encouragement that they give are one thing, the words of gentle rebuke that they give, and they're usually gentle, but it's like, we're curious about this. I've been trying to convince my philosophy students that we don't critique things, we do appreciation and wonder. I appreciate this. I wonder about this.
The compliment sandwich.
Right. So, but I think you get a lot of appreciation and wonder from people at church. Before the service, after the service, they notice something they like. They have a question about something they don't understand. These are all extremely important character-forming rituals in our life, and Sabbath observance, observing the Lord's Day as a day set apart for the worship of God and for rest. That ritual part has been, it's been important to me. It's been really important in what my family has been. And I think that having this shared understanding of what Sunday is for, a day to remember that we don't work until we die, that our value is not found in what we produce. That those are weekly reminders that that's not who we are.
Yeah.
And we get to work. We don't have to work.
Yeah.
So the difference between, some people have commented that the move from the Sabbath being the seventh day of the week to the Lord's Day being the first is that you work, and then enjoy a Sabbath rest, as opposed to the Sabbath rest reminds you that you get to work for 6 more days. And I like that. The first day of the week being the day that is set apart unto the Lord has the advantage of saying, I am now recharged, and Jesus is sending me out into the world in order to accomplish his things. So, I've got 6 days, not 5. The world pattern is 5 and 2.
Yeah.
And first of all, it hasn't been going on for terribly long.
The Industrial Revolution, right?
Well, it's actually later than that. It was a Depression-era legislation. This is something that, the walls are closing in.
They're coming in.
No, it was in the 1930s. In order to increase employment, they started the 40-hour work week.
Right.
And so if you have to pay people time and a half instead of working them 60 hours a week, it will save you money to hire more people and work them all 40. And that's how we went from 6 days a week, 6 days of labor and 1 day for Sunday, to 5 and 2. But in America, we've turned that into 5 days of work, 1 day of playing really hard, and 1 day of recovering from playing really hard.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
And before we've turned it into 5 days of work and 2 days of playing pretty hard. And then Sunday night being utterly miserable because you played pretty hard and now you got to go back to work.
Yeah.
Having the day that is for worship and the family is a really healthy antidote to thinking that your life is mostly about being entertained,
right,
or doing things that will build your brand or something. it's a drawing back into your families of reference, your church and your nuclear family or your extended family, drawing back. It's a reset on a weekly basis to say, where's my home? Who are my people? What is my mission? And that's your identity. Where's my home? Who are my people? And what is my mission? And setting apart the Lord's Day for those reset purposes every week makes it much harder to drift off and find yourself defining yourself entirely in terms of your work or in terms of other worldly projects. So the ritual part I've been teaching for 30 years. Just in the last 3 years, I've Patrick Miller's The 10 Commandments, which I've started using as the textbook for my ethics class. His discussion of the fourth commandment on the Sabbath emphasizes that it's not just about you. There's a pattern, and that is, when you look at the commandment, it says, you will not work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, or the alien within your gates.
Yeah.
And the emphasis there is no one's going to work. And the principle is that the vulnerable who could be required to work, your servants, your animals, the strangers who are dependent upon you, the Sabbath principle is also release for the weak. And that shows up in other places. In particular, it shows up in Deuteronomy 5 when the law is, when Moses gives the law again in Deuteronomy 5.
Yeah.
This time, the reason for not doing any work on the Lord's Day, it's not because in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth.
Yeah.
In Deuteronomy 5, it's because you were slaves in Egypt. Remember that there was a time when you were exploited for your labor.
Yeah.
Don't be like that with the people who are dependent on you.
Yeah.
And that struck me because I have thought about the Sabbath largely in individual personal terms.
Sure.
It has been such a blessing to me to know that I'm going to work 6 days and then have a day that is not about trying to keep up with the tasks that I have.
Yeah.
It's a day to reflect on God's goodness to me. But I've always thought about it mostly in personal or family or church terms. But I didn't think about it in terms of all the people that I was forcing to work or could be forcing to work, and the people who were kind of at my mercy as an economic player. I don't have employees. I don't manage a large portfolio of anything. And yet there are people who that are affected by my choices. And so I'm because of that, more careful not to require other people to work on Sunday to make it possible for me to go out to eat.
Right.
If other people invite me, I'm not going to say, well, no, that will offend God if we go
Come
out.
to my house.
No, it's going to be like that. It'll be, what can we do together that isn't making it more attractive for other people to work? And so I don't have a problem with people earning money on Sunday. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
I think it's too bad. And I think for people like you, pastors, you're going to do a lot of work for which you are paid on Sunday. And I think the challenge for people who find themselves in situations where they must work on Sunday, and there are a lot of people in those where it's not really an option, it's important, one, to make sure that you're there for worship. Some shifting of your work schedule may be necessary, but you want to be there for worship. But then you also want to carve out another time where your family can take delight in each other.
Yeah.
And that's fairly hard to do when you have children who are in school. You might, like you as a pastor, might take Tuesday off-ish, but your children are at school.
Yeah.
And so finding a time, and everything about American society militates against you taking Saturday as the day that you invest in your family,
Right.
because it's piled all of the fun, and your children would certainly recognize, hey, wait a minute, I'm being deprived of fun in order to spend time with you. Yay.
Birthday parties are all gone, and yeah, that's
Right.
right.
So I'm not recommending that, but some kind of routine where
Yeah.
your children understand that time is arranged for the purpose of having these periods of reset. I think that's like, it'll help them understand the importance of the family in their own life, help them understand the place of the church in the family's life. Uh, but parents have to do this. This is part of the joy of parenting, is you get to structure time for your family.
Yeah.
And by that structuring, teach them how reality works. And I think the gift that God gives us in the command to set the Lord's Day aside is not for the purpose of diminishing our fun at
Right.
all.
Right.
I don't think it's a test to find out whether you're serious about following the will of the Lord. I think it's straightforwardly just given as an enormous piece of cake. Here, eat this.
Yeah.
It will be delightful in itself. You will be glad that you ate it. And then there are people who say, no, I don't want the cake. Well, okay. So I'm not inclined to think that it's a sin to squander the Sabbath.
Yeah.
I think it's just
A missed opportunity.
it's a missed opportunity. And so for example, I wouldn't think that it would be a role of someone, one of the leaders in the church, to take someone aside and say, I'm calling you to repent for the way you're using the Lord's Day.
Yeah.
So I think people that are habitually absenting themselves from worship, you might take them aside and say, this is a discouraging sign about your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
But it's still not the same thing as a sin. I don't think it's breaking God's command. I think it's a case of refusing to take the gift that God is giving you.
Yeah.
And then the person who wants you to think again about the habits you're establishing with regards to worship and rest, that person is not asking you to, to weep and wail and fear hell. That's not what they're just worried about you.
Yeah.
It's like discovering somebody who, so you have a friend who has decided to spend all of, the only food they really like is Pop-Tarts and Red Bull. And that's
I'm concerned about your health.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're worried about their health. And you also know that they're going to have more energy and be happier people if they would eat a balanced diet.
Yeah.
But you don't take them aside and say, you're a sinner, repent for, okay, there might be a stewardship problem there. But suppose that's all they know. They don't know any better.
Right.
I think that a steady diet of worldly entertainment in the absence of worship and rest is like a diet of Red Bull and Pop-Tarts.
Yeah. Well, to that point, I remember in college, we had some friends who had a business, and it was struggling. And so they felt like we've just got to exert more energy into this. And so then they would run to church, leave church, straight back into the office, grind. And it was the Red Bull and Pop-Tarts illustration. And finally, I think someone came along and said, this is not going to end well. You're going to burn yourself out. You're going to burn your employees out. And finally, I think the owner of the company or whatever it was finally said, this isn't working anymore. We're going to take Sunday, and that's going to be our time. We're going to rest. We're not going to do the work stuff. And you would think, oh, you've lost a whole day of productivity. Well, the business ended up getting blessed because of that. Your employees are now recovered and rested and have had that. There's more mental capacity and space. And to your point, this is, it's what Jesus says. Man was created for the Sabbath, not the Sabbath for man. Did I get that right, or did I say it backwards? Anyway,
No, the Sabbath was created for man.
For man, yeah.
It was for our good,
right? That's the point. So here's my question: When do the rituals and the things that do just create blessing, when do they cross over into a sense of legality, where we see, Jesus is pushing back on the Pharisees? Whereas for them, it's like ticking a box. It's almost lost its entire benefit at that point, because now it's like I'm heaped with shame and guilt if I haven't done it, and creates a whole different line of argumentation.
Well, so this is a difficult question, but I think I can be helpful. Think about the steps you've taken to care for your health.
Right.
So I try to spend an hour on the treadmill or the elliptical machine every day, and that's good for me. And then let's just go with that. I'm going to spend an hour a day on the treadmill, not Sunday. Another reason I love Sunday. It's like 6 days thou shalt thou treadmill, and the seventh is a Sabbath unto the Lord your God.
The Jews are walking to synagogue,
That's right. But so when I don't, I just with my own relationship with my workout routine, that can become dreary. I'm checking a box.
Yeah, right.
And that's just with my relationship with myself. And now add the layer of you're a parent with children, or you're a pastor with a congregation. When you add that power relationship, then when the people who are in a position to hold you accountable turn it into a rule and not about the relationship, then it has become oppressive.
Yeah.
So if my children didn't want to go for a walk with me, and we did reach that, when they were teens, they didn't want to go for a walk.
Yeah.
So do I say, no, Sunday's the day we go for a walk? Or my children discover that this happened. My children just forgot about a homework assignment until Sunday afternoon, and it was due on Monday morning. And then, oh no, would it be a sin for me to do the homework assignment right now? Or should I just get an F on the assignment? Well, in that case, I said, I'm going to support you no matter what you do. Because the opportunity to rest on this day is a gift. And it could be that the assignment that you're supposed to do is really important for your educational development. And it could be that your grades are not an idol, and you really, you need to stay eligible for sports or something. I'm going to leave it up to you. But this is easily the most complicated and perplexing part of parenting, is figuring out when you're going to leave it up to them to do things and live with the consequences.
Right.
And so I remember with one of my children when this happened, and I said, here's what you need to know. I love you. I'm going to support you. If you want to work on the homework rather than going for a walk together, that's fine. It's your choice. If you decide you want to go for the walk and just get a 0 on the assignment, I will support you in that as well. I won't be angry about your grades. I'll quietly be kind of happy that you thought time together was more important than your grades.
Yeah.
And I told her that. I told her all those things. And then she decided that she just didn't want to be the kind of person who was worshiping her grades. So she didn't do the assignment. She went for the walk. She was sort of grumpy on the walk, but we did the thing together. And looking back on it years later, she was able to say, the grade didn't matter very much.
Right.
Maintaining the relationship and doing the things that we do together, that's what she valued.
Yeah.
So I think when it's about the relationship and not about keeping the rule, I think it's not oppressive.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how to word this, but just while you were saying all this, I was thinking, where's the line for how much is too much in terms of playing, resting? I think everybody's always looking for the line. How far can I go before I cross and maybe that's not even the right way to phrase that question, but this is like moderation? Is it, I certainly, I've definitely underlined your concept of rule versus relationship. And I think, that's a really helpful prism through which to look at certainly something like the Sabbath. But we are a culture of excess. There's gonna be an excess of rest or an excess of play or even your point of the 5 and 2 days. It's like I gotta get all my play in, and I'll stay up all night if it to feel like I've had this sense. So I mean, just in your own thinking and your own time with family, how do you sort of negotiate that? And maybe it's a simple answer, but I
don't think, yeah. So you're right. We want to have lines. We want to have rules to follow, because the nice thing about rules is once you tweak them and get them right, you can stop worrying about it. You run right up against the rail. That's the rule.
Right.
I'm going to.
It's clear.
I don't
it's
think
defined.
I think you want to be asking, especially when you're a parent, but you might take the season of being a parent and recognize that because you're having to indwell what you're asking your children to live, you should be developing habits of asking yourself. When you have children, you say, are they finding this delightful? And they'll tell you. You'll be able to tell that even going for a walk, now they're 13 years old.
Right.
Going for a walk isn't nearly as much fun as it was when they were 6.
You're not cool anymore.
And right, you're not cool. So then you have to find other things that they want to do. What do you want to do? Well, we want to play video games. Okay, we'll play video games. I want you to look forward to this day as a day when we're going to spend time together.
Yeah.
And now we don't play video games. We share YouTube clips. And we play the game where you share a YouTube clip and nobody criticizes it. They just say, "Oh, I like that about it. Here's one that just occurred to me." So you learn about each other's life by watching YouTube together, and it's really fun. But it had to. I think it could become stale if you develop something that worked with a 7-year-old,
right, and maintain it all the way.
Right. Yeah. You want to be, if it's about the relationship, not the rule, and if the gift is rest, the gift is worship and rest, because the Sabbath, when it comes to the Israelites, it wasn't just go sleep all day. It was gather in solemn assembly, remind yourself what matters. You are my people. You've gathered together to hear the word of the Lord. That's what we get to do. That's what you get to do. You get to bring the word of the Lord to us.
Yeah.
But we gather together to sing praise to the Lord, to confess our sins, to hear the word preached and applied to our lives, to celebrate the sacrament. So we're reminded about what matters most in the world.
Yeah.
And with that, God promises you're not going to need to spend the rest of the day being productive. You get to spend the rest of the day resting in my provision for you, resting in the community of believers, and resting in your family. And that should be delightful. So you want to be watching, do your children find this delightful? And if they aren't, then you might start thinking about what you're doing on Saturday.
Right.
It could be that
There's an imbalance. Usually, yeah.
so yeah, if you're going to bed at 2 o'clock Sunday morning and going to the 9:15 service,
You-
you are not at your best. And you might find, like, of all things, you might find the worship of God together with his people a burden. But it's probably a burden because you went to bed at 2 o'clock in the
yeah,
morning.
yeah. I do see a few people yawning in
Right.
morning
So
services. Yeah.
I think I think there's no way to be excessive in resting when the Lord has provided rest. So, but then take steps to make sure that you can drain that cup of rest completely, which means getting a good night's sleep before going to worship the next morning.
Yeah.
And then probably you'll go to bed at a sensible time on Sunday evening. Or maybe you'll take a nap. In the Dutch tradition, they are very serious Sunday afternoon nappers. That's part of the continental observance of the Sabbath, is making sure you get a nap on Sunday afternoon. It was my dad's favorite thing about being in the Christian Reformed Church is we are going to take naps on Sunday afternoon. That was when I was growing up. When my dad was setting the rituals for us, we took naps on Sunday afternoon. I think as you are structuring time for your children, notice what you are finding delightful.
Mm.
And then when you're no longer structuring time for your children, and that's where I am now, I'm not structuring time. It's just my wife and I structuring our life.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, am I taking steps to make this a day of delight? Because that's what God intended. God's offered us this tremendous gift that the world does not know. The world does not know rest, not only because they don't know what full Sabbath rest in heaven will be. They don't have that to look forward to. They also don't know the tremendous peace that comes from knowing that we're not working in order to please God. Like, God is not waiting to see if we do enough for him to let us into his heaven.
Right.
He has accomplished everything for us. And then he says, leave it to me.
Yeah.
So I get to spend one day in 7 reminding myself that God has provided everything I need. And then I get to work 6 other days as working out what the work. In Ephesians 2:10, it says that there are good works that God has prepared beforehand for us to walk in.
Right.
That's Sunday is the day to remind yourself that God has prepared works for you to walk in the coming week.
Yeah.
And then do that work, not frenetically wondering whether it's enough.
Yeah.
But just with the joy of doing the work of the Lord.
Yeah. Well, in that Sabbath rest, I think of the writer of Hebrews. It's there's a sense in which it is that it's a picture of the eternal rest that we're going to have, the joy, the satisfaction, the finding delight at all times. That's a little window of that, and a great reminder to us.
Right, and it's what we get on Sundays. Is we get a foretaste of that perfect and complete and unending rest. And so you might also be looking to see, do your children get that?
Right.
Are they getting an anticipation of heaven? So when we gather together for worship, and I've worshiped at your church often enough that the work that your worship team does to make that kind of like it's going to be in heaven, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But it's extremely well prepared and thoughtful, and it's not hard to imagine that time around the throne of God will be kind of like that.
Yeah.
Kind of loud, but all of us singing together, singing praises to the Lord. Yes, I think it'll be like that.
Yeah.
So we're getting a foretaste of heaven in the worship service, but then in the rest of the day, if we would but take it.
Yeah. Well, these are important things for us to be thinking about, certainly as we consider rules versus relationships, as we think about what does it look like to love God, to love neighbor, as you've highlighted for us in the passages from Exodus and Deuteronomy. And if we're raising little ones, what are they finding delight in? What are we finding delight in? And are we taking part in the great blessing that the Lord has provided for us so graciously? Dr. Bill Davis, can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your wisdom and insights with us on Candid Conversations.
Thanks. This was fun, Jonathan.
Thank you for joining us. Before we close, I want to share that Candid Conversations is taking a summer break. We're pausing in July and August to rest, to reflect, and to gear up for a powerful new season starting August 19th. Now's your chance to catch up on any episodes that you may have missed, raw, honest, and hope-filled stories that meet you right where you are. Stay connected on social. We'll be sharing favorite clips and sneak peeks of what's coming up ahead.